Welcome back. Now, Parliament's Justice and Correctional Services Committee will today continue hearing testimony from stakeholders involved in Thabo Bester's escape. Members of Parliament yesterday grilled the management of G4S, which is, of course, the company managing the Mangaung Correctional Facility where Thabo Bester was jailed and escaped from. So just to make more sense of and maybe compare some notes in terms of what came out of yesterday's proceedings in Parliament, we joined virtually by Marecia Damons, ground-up journalist, and we were also expecting Advocate Glynnis Breytenbach. She hasn't joined yet. She is, of course, a member of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services. If she does join, we'll let her in on the conversation. If not, then we do understand. It was quite a gruesome day yesterday. But of course, Marecia, thank you so much for your time and welcome once more to Morning Live.
Thank you for having me, Sakina.
Let's start with the latest developments now, because what we shouldn't lose sight of is the fact that you and your colleague were responsible for breaking the story about the Thabo Bester escape. And just in case people missed it the last time we spoke to you, very briefly, Marecia, if you could just take us back to how you became aware of the fact that there may have been some shenanigans around the so-called death of Thabo Bester.
Yes, thank you for that, Sakina. So, as we do know, last year in May, the Department of Correctional Services initially sent out that statement where they confirmed that Thabo Bester had died. But later on in the year, around October, we were actually notified that we needed to take a closer look into the circumstances surrounding that fire. And that's when we started asking the relevant authorities questions about updates relating to their investigations, whether DNA testing had been completed. And at that stage, the general response was that the investigations were not yet completed. We also know that at that stage, it was about 5 to 6 months after the fire had broken out, and the Department of Correctional Services was still holding on to their statement that that was, in fact, Thabo Bester. But some of our initial queries that we had regarding that fire was, given that the body had been burnt beyond recognition, we did find it quite strange that the Department of Correctional Services could so confidently say that the body was in fact Thabo Bester's, given the fact that no DNA testing had been concluded and the fact that the body had been burnt beyond recognition. And just some of those queries that we had were enough for us to actually start digging a bit deeper into the story.
So coming to yesterday's proceedings in Parliament, Marecia, I think, one of the explanations that stood out for me was about how the body possibly got into prison. So I would imagine you and your colleagues were also watching this. What did you make of how it transpired yesterday and also the explanations that were offered by G4S?
Yes, so obviously throughout our investigations, rumors got thrown in as well as unverified information. So there was speculation that a vehicle had come into the facility, but then yesterday we got confirmation from G4S that on the 29th of April last year, a vehicle had actually entered the facilities without a gate pass. And according to individuals who we have spoken to who do work at G4S or who used to work there, the entrance to the facility is incredibly tight and everything in the vehicle is checked. There are cameras around the vehicle, so everything does get checked before a vehicle enters the facilities. But what we heard yesterday was that there was a vehicle that had entered the prison facilities without a gate pass, and that vehicle actually had a TV stand in it. And that TV stand was taken inside the facilities to the recreational area. And it still hasn't been confirmed yet, but there is speculation that the body, which was eventually planted into Thabo Bester's cell, it is speculated that that body might have been in the TV stand that this vehicle had transported into the facility.
And just going back to your expose on this particular matter, because where the issue of that body became interesting, as you reported it, and if I recall correctly, Marecia, was when the mother, Thabo Bester's mother, tried to claim that body, but Dr. Nandipa Makutumana also tried to claim that burned body, but then Thabo's mother, when she was asked to do a DNA test, there wasn't a match with her and the dead body. So if you can maybe just talk to us a little bit more around that.
Yes, so the day after the fire had broken out, an autopsy was performed on the body, and the day after that, Dr. Nandipa Makutumana actually came and claimed the body, and she claimed to be his customary law wife. But what came out yesterday during the parliamentary briefing is that the members of parliament did find it quite strange that the body was delivered or handed over rather to someone who wasn't related to Thabo Bester. And what came out was that he actually had an uncle as his next of kin, but apparently the authorities couldn't get hold of this uncle after the fire had broken out, and Dr. Nandipa Makutumana was the next person on the list, and that's why the body was released to her. And she had taken it to a morgue in Soweto with the possible idea of having it cremated, but somewhere along the line, that body was confiscated by police. Thabo Bester's mother, in an interview that she had with us, explained that she heard on the radio that Thabo Bester had died, and that she went to go and try to claim the body, and DNA testing was done between her as well as the body, but there was no match found between the two, and the body was therefore not released to her. So that is also just where some of the inconsistencies and suspicious circumstances were once again raised at the time. And I think that that's also when Ground Up had a very strong suspicion that that body was not Thabo Bester's and that he had certainly escaped.
So listening to G4S yesterday, they basically insisted that they didn't know because they were not handed a pathology or a DNA report regarding this mismatch with the mother, etc. In terms of your investigation, what do you know that they knew as G4S, and how far back would they have been aware? Because I think that centers around the question of why G4S didn't do further investigations at, I suppose, sooner than they did.
Yes, so these were some of the questions that we actually posed to G4S at the time of our investigation. And what we do know is that last year, a few months after the fire had broken out, investigations were already underway amongst the South African Police Service, the Judicial Inspectorate, as well as the Department of Correctional Services. And throughout these, G4S had given video footage, interviews with their employees, and it is strange that G4S would not have had any access to the outcome of the DNA testing. Coming out of yesterday's briefing, G4S said that they were only made aware of the DNA inconsistencies during a meeting with the Judicial Inspectorate in February this year. But again, that would have been very strange, because what we do know is that in October last year, there was a meeting between the Department of Correctional Services, the Judicial Inspectorate, as well as the police, where it came out that there were strong suspicions that Thabo Bester actually did not die in that fire, and that there was a possibility that he had escaped. And given that G4S is the company that is co-running that prison facility, it's highly unlikely that they were not informed of the developments in the investigation.
And then there was also talk around letters, emails that had been written. Now, just in terms of that, I mean, we don't necessarily want to name the whistleblowers, but the people who came forward to basically try and alert authorities, how much do you know about that, Marecia, and what happened to the emails that they had tried to send to authorities higher up?
Yes, so we are aware of two of those. One of the first ones being an email that was sent in June last year by an inmate at the Mangaung Correctional Facility to the Deputy Minister of Justice, Mr. Patekile Wolomisa, where the inmate actually expressed that Thabo Bester had not died in the fire that had happened the month before, and that he was trying to cover up an escape. But what we do know is that that email was not responded to. This inmate followed up again in November last year, but it doesn't seem as if there's been any action taken on that. In response to that, the Justice Ministry said that they were looking for that email, but they were unable to find it. What we also know is that in October last year, an inmate also at the Mangaung Correctional Facility actually wrote to the Free State High Court, also telling them that Thabo Bester did not die in that fire and that he had escaped and that he had done so with the help of a G4S employee. And it has now come to light that that employee was actually Mr. Sinoe Matsuara, who appeared actually at the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court earlier this week, now on charges of murder and also aiding Thabo Bester in his escape, as well as defeating the ends of justice. So those are just some paper trails indicating that the inmates at the Mangaung Correctional Facility actually notified the necessary authorities of Bester's escape.
So just finally, Marecia, 7 employees have now been suspended, including those who were supposed to inspect the cameras, 3 Mangaung Correctional Centre employees, and including Mr. Motswara, the one you just mentioned, who was dismissed for not following procedures. But as far as your investigation went, how many people do you think may have been involved in the chain of events that took place at the Mangaung facility? Does that 7 seem about right, or do you expect that more people will be brought to book?
Well, we definitely expect a lot more people to be brought to book, and the reason being, when it was explained to us how the systems work at the Mangaung Correctional Facilities, given that it is a maximum security facility, only certain employees have access to certain things at the facility. So it's highly unlikely that the 3 people who we know were dismissed for their alleged involvement in this were the only people involved, as well as the 7 others who have now been suspended. So I think from the outcome, not only of the briefings, but also of the investigation, it's going to show that a lot more people were involved in this, because this was a rather elaborate escape, and it clearly took a lot of time to think out and to conduct. So it's highly unlikely that only so few people were involved in this, and we are expecting a lot more individuals to be implicated.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Marecia Damons, of course, with Ground Up, one of the journalists who worked on the story, broke the story that have brought us to this point, revealing what had happened in that Mangaung Correctional Facility, and also bringing to the fore the fact that the body that was burnt beyond recognition was, in fact, not that of Thabo Bester. And that's also our question of the day. We're asking you about the latest developments in the story. Let us know what your thoughts are at Morning Live SABC.